actually quite excited for this week's guest. I am excited to be back with you. I learned a little bit of something while I was off, while we were out on holidays, and while I was busy trying to navigate my way through 2022. But I'm back. We're back and I'm excited. Today, we're going to have a guest, ladies and gentlemen, that is like none other we have ever had. And she is an author. She is a hypnotherapist and a life management expert. She's an American actress and model and best known for being in Evil Obsession and Time Under Fire. You might have heard her on air next to none other than, you won't believe it, but Howard Stern. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome today's guest, Kimberly Friedmutter.
Hello.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to see you again.
It's great to see you again. So, okay, you are probably, and I've said this to you before, maybe not in these words, but this is what I mean, one of the most evolved, enlightened, and motivational people I have ever had the pleasure of speaking with.
Wow. Where's my halo? Halo.
Well, listen, by the end of the show, trust me, they will be popping all in, because what you have done with your book is life-changing, but we'll get there. Kimberly, what I want to know is what went into the making of someone such as yourself, and how did you get here? Let's talk about young Kimberly, where she was born and where did she grow up?
Well, thank you for asking. So the global answer to that is a lot of trials and tribulations. As you know, we know character grows in the dark, right? So that's like a mushroom that way, or like a good truffle. It grows in the dark and oftentimes underground. But so I was raised in San Antonio, Texas, and to two loving parents, one of which, my mother, was undergoing some real strategies with her health and was only given like 2 years to live. So at the time, diagnosis from a medical doctor. And so at the time, she gathered us around and gave us the news and shipped me off to New York to model and to go to Europe and start working on my book and all of these things. And, when I think back, like as a mother, how hard that probably had to be for her, to send off her daughter. My older sister was already out of the home and having children and such and was settled. But in my case, it had to be pretty fearful, when I look back on a time like that for her.
Wait a minute, Kimberly, forgive me for interrupting you.
Sure.
But at 14, and we've kind of jumped a few years here, but you moved to Texas, to San Antonio when you were about 5, you said. And at 14, your mother received a diagnosis that said she only had 2 years and sent you off to New York to model?
Yes. So she reached out to Lord Snowden. My mother was very resourceful. And, if you didn't have the luxury of knowing your parents as adults and you think back on, all of the things that they did, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, she was very, very resourceful. So she reached out to Lord Snowden because she knew that he was a photographer and it was shooting things for Vogue and whatnot. And he suggested that she reach out to Ford Modeling Agency and send them my photos and all this kind of thing. So we set all that in motion. I moved to New York. They sent me to Europe to, back in the day, you worked on your book like that. I'm not sure how you do it now, but that was when we actually had, hard paper photos. And I remember when fax machines came out and you had to know if you were faxogenic or not. And if the photo, because sometimes the photo would end up with just like 2 nostrils and 2 eyeballs, if it wasn't faxogenic. Anyway, interesting times.
So while you were in New York, were you still in school or were you homeschooling? How did you complete your education at such a young age to be focused on modeling?
Right. So it was exactly, opposite of each other, if you think about it intuitively. So what happened was there's a program called Independent Studies, and just excuse me for 1 second because that's my puppy. Maybe somebody can get the dog. The dog's in distress. I might have to text her. Anyway, so 1 second. Nada. I know we're live. This is funny.
This is the joy of being live. We're authentically living our lives. So this is it.
Anyway, so about schooling, luckily I was bright enough to be enrolled in independent studies. And the interesting thing is my mother was a school teacher. So I kind of had the tutoring on the side with her, as well as independent studies where you just do your work remotely, which we all know now, isn't that big of a deal because everybody's done it just about who has children. But at the time, it was a special thing. It was mostly reserved for children who were either modeling or in entertainment in some form or fashion. So you just did your work offsite and then you sent it in.
That's pretty exciting and very interesting because when you put it into context of time, today we're thinking, oh yeah, no problem. But, we're
late 70s, early 80s. It was
so very different time and place. So while you're in New York, you're off independently studying, independently modeling. You're in this fast paced, everybody knows New York City can either eat you up, spit you out, or just makes you the brightest shining star there is. How are you navigating all this on your own?
Well, with a coffee pot in the bathroom, in the places were small we were staying in, and they were far from luxurious. It wasn't like what you see today on Instagram at all, the way we lived. And especially in Europe and the pensions, you literally had like the bathroom right next to the kitchen, right next to the bed, and 6 of us crammed in there. So I learned how to steam vegetables in a coffee pot. I don't know if you know how to do that, but it's fascinating. You can make oatmeal that way. You can make soup that way. You just put the water in, and then the hot water comes down, you put the vegetables in the coffee pot, and then the hot water steams. I think we had that on the washing machine when we would eat dinner. But I found things that interested me. Most of the girls, of course, we were all beautiful and young and, ripe for the picking, if you want to look at it that way. But I was very nervous about nightlife and all of that. So I joined some culinary classes and things to keep me busy after hours, after working, so that I wouldn't. That whole world of after and clubs and all that made me very nervous. I was young, and I just,
so you went
my
to cooking
constitution.
classes instead of clubbing with your girlfriends.
Yeah. Well, because I needed to be there. Like I needed the money and I needed to do it. And so it wasn't playtime, or it wasn't. It's too bad too, because when I look back on it now, I think, gosh, that would have been like so much fun in my adult brain looking back. And I did not have fun with it. I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it as really, I have to get that job. I have to get that booking. I have to go on these go-sees. Like I really thought I need to be fresh for tomorrow. I ran it like a business.
How in God's name at 14, 15-year-old, you were so focused? What created that in you? What influenced your thinking to make you so level-headed at such a young age?
Yes. So I think, we always question nature versus nurture, what, has the predominant effect. But in my case, I didn't have like a fun and fruity childhood. Ours was based on, get up, it's time to go out and pull weeds, or, get up and do chores. So like I never watched cartoons. People laugh, like they'll talk about cartoons of their childhood, or, you see the lunch boxes with like the Brady Bunch and all that on it. That was not my life, being raised at all by my family. My mother was very serious. My family was fairly serious. My dad was kind of the jokester. He's alive today, by the way. My mother since has passed, but my dad at 93 years old. And so if you learn something from what I'm saying, learn that morality and that kind of attitude and that lightness of heart served him well, evidently, because he's still kicking and making jokes and playing his harmonica. So there's something to learn there, whatever that is.
So you're in New York City. It's the 70s, 80s. You come in as a teenager. Tell us a little bit about that trajectory. How did that go for you? Was it a career that built on with its own momentum, or was it a hit right away? How did that work for you?
Well, I was lucky because at the time, in that business, they have setups for girls like myself who don't have their family. So they come and they pick you up on little Vespas and they zip you around town and really show you the ropes. You end up walking a lot. You end up, crying a lot. I mean, I do remember one particular time I was in Paris, and, I'm this little girl from Texas. And I mean, I don't know. I'm standing on the corner. It's raining and there's no cabs or any rides. I don't know where I live because I had written it down on my palm in pen and the rain had washed it away.
Oh,
So I have an open palm, a wet hand, and I went into, my father was a car dealer. He wasn't a dealer, but he was a car salesman at a dealership. And so that I knew, car salesman. So I found, when I looked up, there was a Rolls Royce dealership, and I was like, hallelujah, hallelujah. It was like literally like seeing Jesus Christ himself. And I went running to the Rolls Royce dealership, and I remember going in there and I said, Parlez-vous English, y'all? Like, who speaks English?
y'all.
And it was literally like, y'all was the end of everything you ever asked
Oh,
anyone.
that's so beautiful.
And they said, where do you live? And I held up my palm. I live here. And then I looked, I was just sobbing. I mean, boo-hooing. And so they got me home. They probably called every agency. You know, just like, I mean, it was nowadays, I would have grabbed me and hugged me and put a blanket around me and taken me home too. But bless, it's times like that. And then, just like even in New York, hearing, the trash dumpsters and the things and just all the things that you're not used to. I lived on acreage in Texas with the horse and chickens and goats and dogs and, fish out of water for sure.
So, Kimberly, help me understand now. Tell me about 5 or 6 years later. Are you still in New York City, or are you moving to the West Coast, or did you move to Paris? Tell us about that shift, that trajectory, and how you're now entering into young adulthood.
Right. So I met, it's the same, it's like the old producer actress story. I met a gentleman that had a garment company, and they had hired me to model their clothing. And so anyway, he and I fell in love is the short story. And so he lived in Los Angeles. I moved there. We married, and were married for, I guess, 20 years we were together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. So really,
A long day.
Do you have children, Kimberly?
I don't. I have pets. Back to the animal thing. Well, what happened too is like it didn't always agree with my body, but I really love animals. I mean, animals were my thing. And so I feel like, and this might not be right, I'm not here to psychoanalyze myself, but this is what I think. I think that because my childhood kind of felt short, like I felt like it was interrupted by all this thing, the whole trip I had to take and all that is, I felt like I kind of wanted to go back mentally and recapture that time. So that's my feeling on like not really ever feeling ready to have children. I still actually don't feel ready to have children. So what does that tell you? I'm just enjoying, the childhood aspect of it. I'm trying to go back and recapture some of that.
I have no children, and I think I am probably the best auntie you'll ever find. And I'm very okay with not being the mom, because I am sure I'm the mom who'd forget to pick my kid up at school. But that's another story.
Can't imagine that being you now. I also have nieces, so I'm and they have sons as well. So I have nieces with sons, so I'm covered. Plenty of children.
A little bit of everything. So let's talk about your evolution, your maturation, because you went in level-headed. Did you ever lose your mind? You're married for 20 years. You got married at a young age. You went to New York at a young age. At any point in time, were you feeling like, okay, I need to just lose my mind a little bit and have some fun? Or have you always stayed the course?
So work is fun for me. So when I'm producing, I'm like lit up. I say, what lights you up? That's what lights me up, is producing things. And so I've tried to not produce. I've tried to be, just, and I hate to say just wife, because I know that minimizes a very important role. But I've tried not to work, and it doesn't work for me. It just doesn't. I took some time off and I wrote this, I mean, this is like, I took a few years off. My husband, that I'm married to now, said, oh, take some time, this and that. And, oh, okay, I'll write a book. So Simon and Schuster. But, that's kind of my time off is,
Still
I can't. Yeah. It's not in my constitution. I enjoy work. And I have plenty of time. I mean, I love to play golf, and there's things that I enjoy, socializing and all that, but I'm a worker bee. I'm
very eager to talk about subconscious power. Use your mind, use your inner mind to create the life you've always wanted. But I'm curious as to how you got there. I know you spent time on air with Howard Stern. What did you do in when you moved to LA? Were you still modeling? Is that when you got into acting? Because you've got quite a few films or TV productions under your belt. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Right. So after I met my husband and moved to Los Angeles, I started modeling there because that's what I was doing in New York and overseas. And so then that always segues, you're in LA. So it segues to then playing the supermodel in a movie and then doing this and that and the other, in TV shows. I played a police officer, flight attendant. I mean, you name it. So wife of what was he? An organized crime Russian man, just anything. I always just said yes. And then I figured out if I wanted to do the role. I was like, yes, I will take it. Yes, I can do that. I can, fly from a helicopter on a chain. Yes, I can do that. I mean, the things you say, so funny. Get the job and then figure it out after. So I did that. And then I started writing, and in the writing, not the book or anything, but just writing screenplays and whatnot. And then in that, I created the radio talk show, which then aired on KLSX 97.1 FM, which was the only FM talk station in Los Angeles at the time. And it was also known as the Howard Stern station because it's his station that he was on, or the station he was on, Tom Likas and a bunch of those guys. It was heavily male dominated. And so my show was a little bit more couple friendly. Mm-hmm. And in that, we had so many listeners that I thought, boy, I'm not enjoying this. I'm a little nervous about everything I'm saying and, how it's coming off, and will I have anything to say? There's always that. And so I went to see a hypnotherapist about my angst because it didn't preclude me from doing my work efficiently or with great efficacy. But what it did do is it blocked the enjoyment of the work. That was my end user experience. So I went to her to have her hypnotize me out of the fear of, 8 million people listening to my every word and call-ins. And, it's tricky. And so it worked.
You first had your encounter with hypnotherapy by going in to get hypnotized.
I did. Thank goodness I had the foresight to seek that therapy out because, I'm all about traditional cognitive behavioral therapy. I think it's amazing for people that need it. And I've been some of those people in the past, or one of those persons, and it's amazing. But this was much easier for me, and it worked like seamlessly, like right away. In fact, I even went into the studio the very next time and I thought, where's the fear? I started looking for the fear, like, I feel good about this. I'm very connected to what I'm saying. I'm very connected to the callers. And then I thought, maybe it's on the outro that'll happen, or maybe it's in the next intro, or maybe it'll be when someone stumps me with a question, or I don't know. And it just never came again. I wouldn't be able to sit here and do this had I not had it. I just had this thing came over me, and I don't know where it came from. I've been a child performer and entertainer my whole life. It was just something that crept in. I don't know, but it sure left as fast as it came in, beautifully so, after hypnosis.
So Kimberly, how soon after your experience with being hypnotized did you decide you wanted to study hypnotherapy and become a hypnotherapist?
Well, after my success with that one issue, I took her a list of probably 20 more issues. I said, get a load of this. Let's work on these things. And again, it was so seamless. Literally, I felt like I was laying down to take a little snooze. And then she said, and you'll feel awake and fully aware. And I was, and then I left and I didn't have that issue anymore. It's really wild.
In one session?
In one session.
Okay, let's get
to the things I was going for. Yeah,
let's get to the subconscious power, because your current husband, who suggested take a little time off, and then you end up writing the book. How did you meet him?
I met him through a matchmaker.
Non-traditional. I love it.
Everything's non-traditional. It's so interesting because I was living in Malibu and I was just working all the time, predominantly with addicts. And my girlfriends were saying, you got to get out of the house. You got to do some more than I was actually officing out of the house, a home office too. So I really wasn't going anywhere or doing anything. And so they introduced me. It was more of an intervention. Isn't that funny?
I can attest they did a great match. It's a beautiful thing. Keep going. Let's talk about let's talk about the book. Let's talk about what made you decide to write the book, or did you make a decision to write the book, or did it just happen?
Right. So a publisher had reached out and asked if I'd be interested in writing a book. And so I said, absolutely. And I think she wrote on a Friday, and I believe I was in her office in San Francisco on a Monday. I was like, I will be right there. And so we worked it out, figured out all the dynamics of it. Of course, it takes years, to do.
Mhm.
And then when it came time, because there's a lot that you do, that are precursors to a book. And so Simon and Schuster bid on the book. It was Atria Books there, the imprint at Simon and Schuster, and they bid on it, and we loved them and thought we were great partners, and now we have a book.
Now, what I did, because in all the months I've had this book, I think you gave this to me back in
In New York, maybe in August. Yeah.
Yep. Wow. And I placed it on my desk as one of those things I must read. And I kept thinking about it. But I never picked up the book because something said I wanted to connect more with it. And I also needed to check into my subconscious thinking and biases of hypnotherapy because, some of us hold dearly to that thing called control. Yeah.
Not you.
Never. But what I did, Kimberly, I did the audiobook.
Oh.
With your voice and this content. Let's talk about the content. Let's talk about what you call the hacks and how getting into trance really taps into the subconscious.
So hacks are simply, that's the buzzword for things to do on your own, basically. Do it yourselves. And the hacks are, interesting ways to self-hypnotize. So it's interesting about trance because there's so much mystique about it, and there's so much, kind of buzz about it. If you want to be popular at a party, just say hypnosis, whisper it, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, because it's this mysterious part of our brain. A doctor can't, or a surgeon can't operate on it, on your subconscious. Like, it's very much a part of us, and it runs us. And it's actually the you inside of you, if you want to put it simply. But what happens is we are in trance many times a day on our own without even realizing it. So ways that you're in trance would be certainly when you sleep, that's for sure. But when you're driving and you didn't consciously pay attention to how you got there, and all of a sudden you're pulling into your place and into your garage, right? Or you're looking at a beautiful fireplace and flames, or, your children playing with a ball, anything that has you mesmerized, has you entranced. Oftentimes people will say, oh, well, I don't know if I could be hypnotized by a hypnotist. And I say, well, list 5 of your top priorities, and those are your hypnotists. It can be small, shiny objects. It can be large, shiny objects. I always joke that men like large, shiny objects and women prefer small, shiny objects, like a fish. But so it's interesting because we are transfixed. We're mesmerized, entranced by many things in life. And so simply like by food, you take a bite of your favorite meal, and the eyes roll, and oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm transfixed. I love this. I'll have more. You see, so if you let life really entrance you in that way, you'll see how many times it has. Advertisers entrance us, flashing images, Instagram. I mean, look at any table next to you in the next restaurant you go to that has children, and they've all got their iPads or their phones or something they're looking at. Oh yeah. I mean, seriously, it's like what doesn't have you transfixed? There is an interesting little bit that I use when I see people in person, and it's a Snickers bar. And on the one side, it says Snickers in their brand font, which everyone's familiar with. If I had it now, I'd show you, but I ate it. Anyway, the package says Snickers. And then when you flip it over in the same font and in the same way, it looks like it says Snickers, but if you read it, it says satisfies. That is meant to be an embedded command to your subconscious. Snickers
Yeah.
satisfies. So no matter what side is up in the box at presentation in the store, is you're going to see some Snickers and you're going to see some satisfies. It's telling you buy this. So if advertisers are using it, and of course they are, because it's the biggest selling point is our subconscious, reach for it, take it, you need it, you want it. There's nothing wrong with that, but certainly for God's sakes, use it yourself for your own betterment.
I love it. I never even thought of the whole Snicker thing, and everybody knows, who can resist a good Snicker bar.
Right.
In looking at the book and reading some of the endorsements, I'd like to call it, or comments and feedback for those who have, Jennifer Hudson says, Kimberly inspires women to be better versions of themselves. Martha Stewart says, Kimberly and I share the same philosophy, often the teacher, always the student. And Mike Tyson says, for anyone who needs to ignite the champion within, I urge you to read Kimberly's words of wisdom. Quincy Brown says, Kimberly, thank you for your words and wisdom. That comes up over and over again. It's wisdom. And having spent time with you, Kimberly, that's one of the things that I know I was transed by, quite frankly, chatting with you, is you're just so wise.
Well, that's nice. Thank you.
It's so, and it comes across in the book. Now, and one of the things too that I found very interesting is you have an entire list of ailments and diseases in the body that are related to emotional trauma.
Thought processes. Yeah.
Please, let's quickly go into that, because I think that's something very important for us to tap into.
Right. Well, thank you. So it's no question or mystery that the mind body connection is real. It's just science. And so that we can put to bed. The fact that thoughts intervene or thoughts create a body, the body is slow and the mind is so fast. So if our chronic thinking leads to a chronic condition, and yes, everything is physical too. I mean, I'm not saying, oh, it's all in your head. That's a very different conversation. but what happens is chronic thoughts can create chronic patterns, old stuck behaviors. Oftentimes people will come in my private practice, which I still enjoy here in Las Vegas and oftentimes Los Angeles. When people come, they'll have a thing that they've really been thinking about a lot subconsciously, and it may not be true. And those things we call false beliefs. So something might be like, a man might come and say, oh, my eyes are bad. My dad's went bad when he was 40. And I say, oh, what's your age? I'm 39. So things like that. That's a very obvious, example, but just for I guess, sample sake. There's many things like that we think. Recently, someone came whose father had passed 6 years beyond now what this individual is, that in age, chronological age. And so the fear is, will I be like my father? Will I die at this age? 7 years, coming. And so we all know that you don't necessarily die when your parents die. I know that everybody has like a little tachometer. My mom was 59 when she lost her life, and she was 50 when she had a brain aneurysm, which ultimately caused her to be a quadriplegic. So I don't worry about that. Of course, I went in for my brain scan to make sure that I didn't have it and all of these things, but there's a difference between science telling you that you're okay or not, and then this chronic thought about it. And it would have, I'm sure I would have had a very different life had I chronically believed that what happens to mom happens to me, what happens to dad happens to me. Now I'm, of course, latching on to my 93-year-old father, saying, I hope what happens to dad happens to me.
Right, and 93.
Yeah, but your thinking does affect your body 100%.
Kimberly, how can we stay in touch with you? And if any of our readers, any of our viewers rather, would like to maybe connect with you, I know you're on the West Coast and our viewers are all around the world, but how can we stay connected? How can they find you? And where can we find your book?
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. So my website is kimberlyfriedmutter.com, and it's FRIEDMUTTER. The book is available all over. In fact, it's in Saudi Arabia. It's everywhere. So that's good news. It's at retailers and it's on Amazon, of course, nationwide. It can be found easily. So yes, the best way probably is via the website and emailing. And then of course on Instagram and Facebook and all of that. I'm sure you have all that information.
Your social media handle?
Yes, at Kim Friedmutter. So it's KIM Friedmutter.
Awesome. Kimberly, I am delighted to be able to call you friend. Uh,
Yes.
I I am mesmerized, transfixed by the audio version of the book because I was thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that you start the book talking about the 8-year-old within. We start all our retreats talking about our little girl within, who we were
Oh,
before we were ever disappointed. So it is such an amazing thing that your book does that. I would love to have more of this conversation with you, talk more with you about the whole process of hypnotherapy and are you accessible to the average person, non-celebrities? Can they?
yes. Yes. I have what I call civilians as well.
Love it.
Non-celebrities, people like to hear what they have to say, but yes, my practice is built on civilians.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking with Kimberly Freitmutter, best-selling author and celebrity hypnotherapist, but more importantly, just an all-around good gal, Southern girl with great values, beautiful smile, great personality, and a big, generous heart. Thank you so much for joining us, Kimberly.
Oh, thank you. I adore you.
I love you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, here in The Whole Woman, we are getting ready for February. It's Heart Health Month, it's African History Month, and so we'll have lots more stories to tell. But more importantly, we're getting tooled up and ready for Women Honoring Women. Stay tuned because March is only around the corner. We have lots of good news to share with you, and we're about to share our agenda and calendar for 2023. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie, and I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. I wish you enough.